order at 12:01. I'm going to apologize for any noise in the background. We have students transitioning to recess at this time, so my apologies if you hear anything in the background. I'm going to ask Chloe to, would you just be able to take the roll based on who you in the meeting?
Sure.
Okay. And then anyone who doesn't join as part, we'll just use that as our roll for today.
Okay.
All right.
Jennifer Rodriguez.
Here.
Cynthia Ritchie.
Here.
Jennifer Graves.
Here.
Robert Sartoris.
Here.
Rebecca Good.
Here.
1 minute, just have to, okay. Admitted someone. Kristen Besega.
Here.
Jennifer Delaney.
Hello, I'm here.
Cynthia Sonemayano.
Present.
Margaret Gustafson.
Here.
Catherine Rowe.
Here.
And Shannon Merriman.
Here.
Great, that's who I've got now. If people join late, I'll just add them to that list as well.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone who was able to come to the meeting. As you know, there is a bill that has been raised, 5436. I believe everybody's had an opportunity to review the bill. And we're having this meeting, this 30-minute part of this meeting, because we have to move on to some other items as well for the ad hoc committee to discuss how we are going to move forward as a committee, or I'm sorry, a board, to address the bill as it stands. I'm going to begin by making a quick statement to all of us. We are in our inaugural stages. We've only had less than a handful of official full meetings. Of this new state entity with the promise of a long positive relationship with the legislator, our board will confront efforts like this persistently, and we need to rise above as a board. My recommendation as the board chair is that board members will likely want to testify. It should be made clear that any who do so in their capacity and in their professional role, not as members of the board, though they can state that they are a member of the board, and they should clearly make that point. And the language might be, while I am a member of the CEPCB, I am testifying today in my professional role as an educator in said district or for said entity. We want to be careful that the board does not appear to be infighting and publicly aired in that way, which could be potentially exploited to the advantages of others and will undermine the authority of the board. So those are my opening statements there. Is there any discussion around that, or anyone else want to make a statement before we start talking about testimony and my role as the chair? All right, Catherine Rowe, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for leading this discussion. I would like to put a motion on the table that you, as the chair, submit written testimony in opposition of Senate Bill 1392, Act Concerning Educator Certification, on behalf of the bill, which preempts the legislative mandated work of this board, as was outlined in the PA 2421. The charge of this committee was to oversee this work. And the language of the bill was drafted in that last session under CPRO, and somehow it circulated and it was not intended to move forward. Instead, this board was charged with developing recommendations for alternate approaches to allow candidates to demonstrate minimum content knowledge under 2441, Section 13A-3. So the board colleagues, as a board, we should abide by our legislative appointment and take the time to research the content, discuss and deliberate, and provide informed feedback. So at this point, I think that that's the message that we need to send to the committee.
I would
Agreed.
second that motion, Dr. Rowe.
Sorry, I forgot that you had made a motion. I thought that you were making a comment. I'm like saying, I agree. So we've got a seconded. With that motion on the table, do we have conversation around that? Is there any conversation, comments, or questions around that current motion? And that was a long motion, so could you actually copy and paste that into the chat for Chloe's records? Thank you. All right, so we have Rebecca Good.
I do have a question. Can you please summarize that, Dr. Rowe, so that I can get a clearer understanding of the motion?
I think she's going to put it in the chat, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
wonderful.
I'm not ready to vote until I see it then. That's all. I just don't
Sure.
want to hold everyone.
Based on the on our chair's initial statement, I agree that we need time, and we also do not want to fully come out and oppose this bill, as it would then, like, as a board, if we want to come out as our own entity, that would make, I can see that, but if we come out as a board, we are actually actively saying, like, we don't agree with what the legislator, like what the Ed Committee just raised, and that does then, like, put us at the, like, in a defensive posture, which is, you know, the legislators, like, they can do as they wish. They brought us into life as a board. They can let that go away. And so it actually, as a board, creates a much more kind of a partnership with them if we're in conversation, but not as a board coming out and saying, yes, this raised bill that you all put forward, we are all opposed to it, even though we have not had a sufficient amount of time to talk through it. So I would say we should come as our own entities, whatever, you know, from whatever kind of constituents we're speaking from. And I think, Catherine, like, that would be wonderful as you speak on behalf of so many. But I would not at this time, especially based on what you said, Jennifer, about we don't want the, like, infighting and going in such an adversarial way at this point when the Ed Committee just raised this. The legislators, especially the committee chairs, have been really outspoken about getting rid of the praxis. And so this is, like, coming out in this. And I think there's a better way to respond.
Anyone else have any comments? All right, so we have
I think
Dr.
there's,
Ritchie, go ahead.
yes, I think there's two more comments. Hi, everybody. Just to back up the conversation too, I mean, this came out of nowhere. And I know you met with the education chair, Leeper, and said that legislation wouldn't be moving forward. Have you had any contact with her since? Or is there any
No.
background of what this is?
I mean, we literally were notified about this on Wednesday, right? It was Wednesday. It feels like a million years ago, but it feels like it was yesterday, right? So it was Wednesday. So we have not had an opportunity to speak with her yet because we were trying to get the needs of the board met prior to within the bylaws in our restrictions within our bylaws. So no, that's not going to happen yet. However, I do have intentions of scheduling a meeting with them with probably next week to have a discussion around what was discussed, the email that she had sent introducing herself and her intent, what was actually discussed and what is happening currently. So there is an intent to have that conversation with her as opposed to sending a formal letter of concern, which I will be doing as the board. All right, are there any other questions, statements?
Yeah, well, I have the floor.
Shannon,
I also just
sorry.
want to add a comment that I was very disappointed to be asked if I sent information to any member of the education committee. The answer to that is no. I had information which I sent to the chair, and you heard me talk about it openly with the request to bring it to the committee. When the chair said no, I respected that because that's the kind of integrity that I lead with. So nothing was shared from me, and I just like that on the record.
Dr.
And
Ritchie, I
nothing was shared
appreciate-
with any of you who have asked for it openly in our last meeting out of respect for the work of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ritchie, for making that statement. The legislation was brought forward the day of our last meeting, and according to our bylaws, could not be included in our agenda, as we need to have any materials 10 business days beforehand. And then an effort was made to introduce it during the meeting. And during that meeting, it was stated that CPRL had a hand in assisting with writing that legislation. So the question was posed, because the legislation was similar, as to whether or not they knew whether any legislation was put forward indirectly or directly to any members of the legislation committee. All right, so Shannon is next.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I just want to echo to some extent what Rebecca said, as well as Cynthia, that the process by which statute takes shape is very much a democratic process. So while we were charged with this work as a board via statute last session that came from the legislature, it is now an iterative process that does require a back and forth. And I don't believe that taking a defensive posture at this time is the right way to go. I do think we should be focusing on just getting down to the business of coming up with our counter thinking of what we would respond as tweaks or adjustments to what has been put forward. It's kind of it's a chess game, right? Like, they put forward a first move. We don't know where it came from. I think I heard earlier at the call that someone was saying that it looked like the legislation we were going to be looking at the last meeting, but we didn't get on the agenda. It's different. It actually takes the power. What I liked about what we were going to talk about at the last meeting, but haven't had a chance to, is that the power is put into the hands of this board to be more agile and flexible and change as we needed to go through guidelines. This language actually is much more prescriptive in capturing it in statute, a very technical path forward of what would constitute content mastery criteria. And so it's different. It came from anyone can submit testimony. Anybody can submit suggested legislation. And then I think the onus is on us to be in a proactive position of responding to that, which I think has just been a concern. Obviously, we got a late start. We didn't get started till November, but once this sets in motion, there's lots of players in the mix. And I think we need to be in a position where we can actually give a response that suggests what could be the alternative, or just an adjustment. I mean, maybe this isn't that far off. We just need to have that dedicated conversation. So I look forward to having that as an extension of today's meeting.
All right, thank you very much. Our next person is Kristen.
Hi, I wanted to speak to the motion that I am seconding. So in case you haven't read the text of the motion, it's in the chat. So the motion is to move that Jen Rodriguez, chair of the board, submit written testimony in opposition of Senate Bill 1392 on our behalf, because the bill preempts the legislatively mandated work of the board as outlined in the Public Act. I think that's fair, that as you're submitting your testimony, that you stick to that the bill is prescriptive. It oversteps our authority as a board, the authority that we were given according to Public Act 2441. I think it's important to note the timeliness, that this change is not for the 26 deadline that we were working towards, but it's actually to 25, which is in like 4 months. So my concern with the bill is that in 4 months' time, they're going to create a portfolio system that is supposed to be reliable, valid, and it's not going to be in 4 months' time. So I'm supporting this motion because I think that, you're capable of submitting testimony that reaches those points without putting the legislators on edge or putting them on the defensive and just asserting the authority of our board. I think, to the point that was just made from Shannon, that the placeholder legislation that was obliquely mentioned in the last meeting, it actually does maintain all the authority of the board and just says, in order to get certification, you would take the state mandated assessment or whatever this board determines to be reasonable. So I think if we're putting forward what is a good alternative to this legislation, I think we have one already. I think the one that was brought forward last time that had an outline of, yes, standardized testing, but yes, also what this board determines maintains our authority without necessarily shutting the door on working with legislators, you know? Thank you.
Thank you. I think our next person is Catherine Rowe.
Again, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Kristen, for that well-articulated statement. I don't think that we're pushing back. I don't think we're being negative. I think that we're asking our colleagues in the Education Committee to take pause and allow us to do our work. And I think that however way that Jennifer decides to draft the letter on that behalf, I think that it could be positive and collaborative.
All right, next is, thank you, Dr. Rowe. Next is Rebecca. And Kristen, can you unselect your raised hand? Thank you. Go ahead.
I am concerned that there is already a defensive posture and contention within us, within this board. It is very clear. And this is, and legislators see that. You can see it in multiple meetings. In advocates and folks who are speaking to legislators and helping draft these raised bills can see that. If Jennifer, as our chair, sits and says, we as a board are in opposition to this, we are openly stating we're in opposition to what our Ed committee has raised. Now, if we are talking about, we would like to propose edits to this, that is different than being in full support or in opposition. That is a proposal of adjustments being made to the current raised bill. That's not the motion that has been put into this chat. And so that is why I will not be voting to approve this motion in this space, but I'd be open to something else.
Thank you. I'm not sure what happened with the raised hands, but I think Cynthia was next and then Margaret, but it got like flipped around. So I don't know if somebody like unselected and then selected. So I'm going to ask Cynthia to go ahead next.
Yeah, no, I was just want to make a statement that I do believe that the way that this has been proposed does circumvent our authority as a board that was put into legislation. But I also do agree that how we respond needs to be strategic, so we can be able to do our work, the tone and how we respond, and what and how. But there are a lot of things written on this bill that circumvents our work. And then if you really keep reading, there's already some of this work happening already. And it would be repetitive. We would have to start from scratch where the department's already doing some of this. So I just wanted to make sure that I'm on record stating that I do believe that the way that this is written is circumventing our authority as a board. And so we do have to be strategic in how we respond. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret?
Thank you. So I want to echo what Cynthia said. I think that was it perfectly. So there's a way to respond, and this always happens. And sometimes we have legislation that as a State Department we do not like, and we have to go back and we have to say absolutely not, but we say it in a strategic way. And so I also want to echo what Cynthia was saying. We also heard from SDE staff that the portfolio option was not operationally simplistic, had significant cost, was really not something that we want on the table. So I think it's better to get ahead of that specifically and talk about the fact that we are reviewing everything, but at this time, moving forward would not be a wise decision. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any additional hands raised. Thank you. I'm going to make a statement here that I think it sets a precedence that in our first opportunity to do the work, in the few months that we've had the opportunity to do the work, and on the heels of voting to have establishing our ad hoc committees and voting to keep praxis in, that there is this effort to circumvent the board. And in doing so, it sets a precedence moving forward of us doing the work as stated in the legislation of Public Act 2441. So I do worry that in this initial reaction, I do also believe that, you know, in any legislation, there are going to be people who are opposed and people who support a bill, and the legislators are used to that. It's part of the process. So to say that it's going to cause a closing down of conversations when my intent is also to have a meeting with Representative Leeper in the coming week, I think speaks to the opposite of that. So those are kind of like my statements of, I think that we're setting a precedence here. So at this point, if there's no more comments or questions, we have several people on here. The motion has been put forward for me to speak on behalf. And though I appreciate the motion, I think our bylaws already speak to the fact that I'm supposed to speak on behalf of the board. So especially if it's factual and speaks to what we've already done. So even though there is this motion, the reality is that we already have bylaws that state that I'm supposed to do that as part of my role as chair. So we can go ahead and, I mean, I guess my question is, do we move forward with the vote considering our bylaws state that already or not?
I have a clarifying question.
I will recognize you in a moment. I do see your hand raised, and I was about to ask the question if we are going to move into any questions or about that. So Rebecca, yes, your hand is raised. Go ahead. Thank you.
Maybe this is Kristen, and in our bylaws, I don't believe it says that you as a chair are to speak on behalf of the board for every raised bill. So and so while yes, you definitely as the chair are to speak on bills that we as a board like come together and determine we want to have a board response to. But am I understanding that inaccurately? Or are you going to be speaking on every bill raised that is in the purview of our board?
Kristen, I can say that I reviewed the video from our meetings on the bylaws, and I believe both Cynthia and Rebecca had put the wording or had the wording changed, and it's based off of the Board of Ed's bylaws. But the work of the board in totality was a conversation in a phrase that was stated, I believe, by you, Rebecca, in that, and the wording was changed to being on behalf of the board in our bylaws, I believe.
Right. The question is, does that entail that it sounds like you're saying we don't need to make a motion because you will be speaking on behalf of the board to any bill, like any bill that's raised, like any bill that's raised, you will speak on behalf of the board. Is that? And that was not
yes,
in the bylaws.
I mean, it wasn't stated that it wasn't in the bylaws as well. So
right. And so
Kristen, go ahead.
I'd like to jump in on this. I put the bylaws word for word into the chat. So it says that the chairperson or chairperson's designee shall be the person authorized to speak as the official spokesperson on behalf of the board. So I think my concern is that it doesn't say either way if the chair must have, you know, the board's permission and authority or not. But I think if this is modeled off how the State Board of Education is run, we can see how they treat the same language and behave accordingly without knowing how the Board of Ed at the state uses that same language ooh, sorry, it's echoing. Uses that same language to determine how the chair of the Board of Ed speaks. I think that would be a good model. I don't think it would hurt to have a vote to officially grant you, you know, the board's authority and the board's support. I don't think that it would hurt as we look into how this language is used at the state level.
I did reach out to a Board of Ed member at the state, and they stated that the chair and the commissioner do not get approval for each statement that they are going to make. Legislation has a 5-day cycle, and they really wouldn't be able to do that each time, or if they were having to speak or do an interview the same day or what have you. So they do not check in, but they do have board members of the board do let the chair know if they are going to do an interview or a podcast or what have you. But the message of the Board of Ed and testimony is not put before them for approval, is my understanding based on that conversation.
Right. We are not the Board of Ed, and I understand we are modeling some of our practices off of it, but we are a new board and we should determine how we will proceed based with that guidance, which is fine. It just makes me a bit uncomfortable to for you to just full-handedly say, this is the way we're going to do it. And there's no conversation around for all of us. And so I appreciate the motion that Catherine has put forth. So at least we can vote on if that is what you're going to speak on our behalf. But by you just saying this is just what I'm going to do, that's not something we have created as a board. It's not in our bylaws. It's up for interpretation. And so we should probably have a discussion.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right. With that said, I think we have Jen. Let me see. I've got to bring it back up because it looks like there might be more than one hand. All right. It looks like we have Jen Grave.
Yeah, I think Rebecca kind of summed it up for me. I think it would be wise at this point, because we are a newly created board, to figure out just moving forward in general, if we are a split board with some things and you are the designated spokesperson, how are we what is the message being sent out if there's members of the board who are not in agreement of what you're communicating? And it's not necessarily just specific for this, but we have a lot of work moving forward over the next few years, and I think a lot of clarity around that would be really helpful for all of us.
Okay, so what I will say then as chair currently is we will vote on this and we will add to our agenda a review of the bylaws in case we want to add anything to the bylaws for the March meeting. Can I get a motion to, well, first let's vote on the motion that Dr. Rowe had presented. Where's Chloe? Chloe, can you go ahead and read that back to us?
Sure thing. Let me just scroll up a little bit. Thank you for putting that in the chat as well. I cannot write that fast or type that fast. So the motion made by Catherine Rowe and seconded by Kristen Besega is that Jennifer Rodriguez, as chair of this board, submit written testimony in opposition of Senate Bill 1392, and that concerning educator certification on our behalf, because the bill preempts the legislatively mandated work of this board as outlined in Public Act 24-41. I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I think there's been good discourse around this conversation and a plan for the future. Let's go ahead and do a vote. All those in favor, click the raised hand button.
And if you could just keep that up, I'm going to just take a tally. All right, thank you.
If you can unselect your, thank you. I'll wait till they're all cleared, including my own. All right, all those opposed, raise your hand now. Do you have them all, Chloe?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. If you could unselect. Any abstentions? Jen, are you an abstention? Are you? Sorry. Thank you. Seeing no abstentions. All right, what was the count total? It was, I think, 8 to 5.
I had 7 to 5 for yes, Kristen, Jen Delaney, Bob, Cynthia Sonamayano, Catherine Rowe, Sarah Larford-Simons, and Jen Rodriguez. 7, and then no, 5.
I think you missed me. I voted yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Margaret. So 8 to 5. 8 yes, 5 no.
What about the other members that are not here?
I mean, this was an emergency meeting that we had to make based on our bylaws and the time constraints. We have to give the public notice 24 hours before a meeting with our agenda. So there was many that could not make the meeting based on the time frame that it was at. But we were trying to be flexible and get this in as soon as possible for the members prior to the Monday meeting, and to allow people to submit their written testimony or sign up by the deadline for in-person or virtual testimony. So I mean, if they're not able to come, those who are in attendance are the voting body, I believe.
Yes, that's what I had raised my hand for. So we do have a quorum, which is a majority of legally appointed voting members of the board, and the quorum's majority is the action of the board. Thank you.
There was a comment, Chloe, can you read off? I think there was something in the chat. I can only keep one window open at a time
Sure.
when I'm looking at hand raised.
The comment, Rebecca, you said you asked if you could see testimony prior to Monday.
And then there's additional questions from.
And then Cynthia, will we be able to add to the testimony or provide feedback?
Okay, I do have a draft of the testimony. I guess it would have to be a motion by the board to review, just to make it official. The testimony and then any conversation and then a vote on that. So if we have a motion, I think, Catherine.
I'll file a motion to hear the testimony.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And who was the second? I'm sorry. Was that Rebecca?
Or me. It was me, Sarah.
Sarah
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So what I can do is, I'm trying to figure out the best way of doing this. I have a Google form that I can share that you can view.
How do I make an amendment to the testimony? I mean, to the motion? Like if I want to say a motion to review and provide feedback on the testimony?
I think you
Can that be adjusted?
You do just what you just said, and then someone would need to second it. Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion just to adjust. Go ahead.
Second. I was going to say a second, but somebody else did it.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a second. Is there any discussion on this?
I just want to make a general statement, and I know we'll have to vote and we have to look at the bylaws, but in my short time here with the department, when we're going through the process, when bills get sent out, we in the department, and I know we don't want to run things in this board like the department, but we all kind of provide feedback. Even if the person at the end, which is normally the commissioner, speaks to it, we kind of all, based on our experience and we bring different lenses to this work, we're able to provide feedback. I'm not sure when we're going to, talk, fine tune our bylaws, but I just wanted to make that statement. So, it has everyone's voice in it, but we understand, Jennifer, you're speaking on our behalf. So just wanted to make that statement.
I appreciate that sense of community and that collaboration. I appreciate that. Thank you. So what I can do is sorry, we need to vote on this. Sorry. So we have a second. All right, Jen, thank you. And we just need Is there any discussion? Raise your hand if you have any discussion or questions. All right, seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. Go ahead and, Chloe, can you read back? Oh, we do have one. Catherine Rowe, go ahead. We can't hear you. I'm sorry. I think you're muted.
You said, can we put it to a vote? So I raised my hand.
Oh, sorry. All right. So we're going to put it to a vote now. Those in favor, Chloe, can you read the motion back?
Sure. The motion on the floor is was made by Rebecca Good and seconded by Cynthia. The motion was to review and adjust the testimony for Monday's public hearing on Senate Bill 1392.
Perfect. Thank you. All those in favor, raise your hand. All right, we've got 12 raised hands, and Jen had to step away. Okay. Any opposed? If everyone unselects, then we can see if there's anyone opposed.
There's still 4 hands raised, but they voted yes, so thanks.
Okay.
I can see everyone's faces. I know you're just, yeah.
Any abstentions? Oh, why do I have my hand still raised? Sorry. All right, and mine was in favor of, Chloe, not against. I just forgot.
Thank you. I got you for that.
Okay, perfect. So let me, it's going to be a Google document. Everybody has access to. Okay, perfect. So give me a quick second. It's taking a minute to load. Sounds like somebody might have had some recess trouble. Okay.
This is Catherine. I'm not sure if everybody's seeing the email, but Patrice emailed in that she's trying to vote and she's on her phone. I'm listening to the meeting on my phone, so unable to vote. Patrice McCarthy.
Hold on just a quick minute. Copy link. I'm going to drop the link into the chat for viewing. That is, yep. All right. I've dropped the link into the chat to review. Let's give everybody about 5 minutes or however long it takes. I would say 5 minutes to review and process, and then we'll open it up to discussion.
Madam Chair, can you share the draft testimony with Patrice as well? I'm not sure if you sent it to everyone.
I did not. I did not send it to everyone. I dropped it into the chat, but let me see if I can send it over to her. Patrice McCarthy. And
I just shared it, Jen, if that's helpful.
That was helpful. I'll send her a direct email as well, just in case. But thank you.
Thank you.
If you're ready to provide any feedback, please raise your hand at this time just so I know who's ready. I want to make sure that I allow time for everybody to kind of gather their thoughts after reading. I think we're just waiting for a few more people to weigh in when they're ready. Okay, if everyone can unselect their hands now, we're going to move forward with any feedback, and I will take any edit recommendations as feedback. All right, so we'll start off with Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got the 4 in the 1, 2, 3, 4th, in the 3rd paragraph line to add the date at which our board was to be able to do our work by 2026. I thought that Kristen's point about this is 2025 was really important. So that would capture that. The second is I do believe you need to replace the contentious language, strongly oppose, undermine, disregard. That those are words that will put us in a very contentious space with whoever the group is, that is speaking directly to ed committee members, so much so that this resonated enough for them to raise the bill. It'll put us at odds, and we don't want to do that. 3, recognize that the ed committee chairs and board members selected and crafted this language from whoever they're talking to and put this forth, because we are saying that you're saying that you don't agree with what the legislators and the constituents they're bringing this feedback are putting forth. And then 4th is a question. I know there's been some sensitivity about like who helps us write and draft and what we're bringing, per kind of Cynthia's, what she shared in the beginning. Did you get help, or was there advisement outside of our kind of board members or SDSE in crafting this?
I had crafted the original, and I spoke with Kristen to kind of look it over, and that we're under advisement at looking at it from our CE, as a CEA representative. But I've drafted my own in the past, and this is my work. So yes. Okay, so because I think that like if while Kristen is wonderful at that, to review something as a board, we're coming in here as our like board members. It's hard to like, I understand, separate our kind of other hats that we wear, but also being reviewed with the co-chair, I think would be like that you would be best before Kristen, though she's just not the co-chair. So that would be our recommendation. Thank you. Thank you. So I just want to make sure I understand the specific feedback. The specific feedback, if I was to import it into the document, would be 3rd paragraph, add the line for 2026 that Kristen had talked about earlier, and possibly adjust strongly opposed and disregard language. And so I'll take that under advisement. Thank you. I'll put the feedback in the chat so you have it. Thank you. Shannon?
Yeah, so I guess one thing I just want to, and maybe this will be part 2 of this meeting, is get my arms around what exactly we are opposing. Are we opposing the language in and of itself, or are we opposing the process by which this happened? Because those are 2 very different things. And I think where we will come out stronger and not be as adversarial with the Education Committee is if we look at it from a content perspective, because how this came to be is the process. And we might not like it, but it's how it works. I think what we want to be is really strategic in saying, like we were proposing, I think in the nuance earlier, is what would we change in what has been proposed? First move has been made. What is our counter move? And I'm wondering what it is in the language, the content itself, which we haven't talked about, that we are actually opposed to. And I see a little bit of that in terms of, like you mentioned something about the cost of the portfolio, the reality, the feasibility of implementing a portfolio, but this isn't speaking to that. It's speaking to the undermining of us, which may or may not fall on deaf ears. I think what they're looking for is a substantive rebuttal of what's been put forward with a counterpoint of what it could be based on our recommendations as a board. And I think, yes, there's urgency. Like we got to move quickly because this will move with or without us potentially. And so I just feel that sense of urgency to be like really specific at this point and get into the weeds of what we want substantively to be the language at the end of the day.
Thank you very much. I'll take that under advisement. Next is Sarah.
Hi. First, I wanted to start out by saying, Jennifer, I just want to compliment you. I know you're the chair of this board, but I also know that you have a full-time job. And I think doing this under such a tight timeline needs to be recognized. So I want to say how much I appreciate the work you have done so far. I also want to say I agree with Rebecca. I think we could put the language, change some of our verbiage to be more positive and more collaborative. I don't think that would be a hard thing to do. And then one piece that I think we could add that I think comes from the whole, where this bill is coming from is this whole sense of urgency. But I think if we added in the bullet points that we want to create and maintain, recruit and maintain a highly qualified teaching force in the state of Connecticut. That is not, that while it is urgent, I don't think it is something that can be done haphazardly or rushed. And so I think if we just emphasize that our goal is to recruit and maintain a highly qualified teaching force, and that process requires some thoughtfulness, that's the additional piece I would recommend.
Can you add that to the chat so that Chloe is able to add that to any notes that she might be taking?
Yeah.
And that goes for anybody else. I think that Rebecca was already putting hers into the chat. So thank you. Teaching force, that process. Okay, perfect. All right, next is Kristen.
Yes, I think everyone had brought up the timeliness, but I just wanted to emphasize it once again that, you know, it's not that we think that these ideas are necessarily bad. It's not that we're unwilling to go into discussions with legislators, but having an implementation of a whole new system in 4 months, you know, while also circumventing the authority of this board is going to be a really big challenge. And if this board decides that portfolio system is something we want to do, then we need time to make sure it's well developed, well thought out, and oh gosh, like the people before me said, we want to maintain highly qualified staff. We want to have recruitment, and I think we do that by taking our time and making sure this gets done right. These regulations weren't going to be repealed until 2026. So the idea that it has to get done in 25 in the next 4 months, I think it has too much urgency, and as like people said, that we should be paying attention and taking our time to get this right.
All right, thank you. I'll take that under consideration. And Anne?
Thank you. I agree with Rebecca and Shannon on this. I think this was put out there to pressure the board to move more quickly. I think that was a strategic move. It's not about the content necessarily, but just to get us as a board to bring something forward. And I do think that the best way to do that is to be collaborative here. And again, I think it's the tone of this is way too, you're not respecting the board. I actually don't think that's their intent at all. I just think this is how legislative process works. And they're throwing it out there and saying, let's see what you got. And we actually are very close to what we got. The subcommittee that was supposed to meet today on the content, Shannon had put forth a lot of really good language about what, you know, having praxis, then having alternatives, the content. We were pretty much in agreement on that already. So my feeling is we say, thank you very much. We appreciate the fact that you are concerned about this. We have studied the research base on this, and we are making this proposal, and we'd like to see how you feel relative to the proposal we were about to make anyway. That makes it much more, we're listening, we have a plan, we're doing things, and the less we can be like, we have to understand this process. I mean, this is going to happen over and over again with us. This isn't going to be the first time. And I feel very uncomfortable taking a stand of being, you know, angry when strategically I know really it's not about that. Sorry, but it isn't.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'll take that under consideration. Rebecca?
Yes, thank you. I agree, Anne. If the edits that would be made is to be able to go through and say, instead of this, we propose this, just like you said, Anne. I think that would be a wonderful way to show that we are in collaboration and we are doing the work. This was meant to push us to move, and we have been moving. We have been doing the work. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any additional raised hands. So Chloe has captured what is being said in putting those things into the chat. I will take those things under consideration in adjusting potentially the language of the testimony and the written testimony that I plan to put forward. In addition to that, I wanted to make some statements on what was said in terms of like the proposals. Our first meeting for the ad hoc committee was supposed to be there today. So our board is actually not discussed or ready in terms of going back to what Sarah said, like having those thoughtful conversations around this legislation. We haven't built consensus or had the opportunity as a full board to talk about those things in lieu of the ad hoc committee beginning their work. So we really wouldn't have that thoughtful and careful legislation recommendations to put forward to them at this time. That was supposed to be the work of this committee today that they were getting started on.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble raising.
No worries. I understand. And I like it to feel like a conversation, right? Like that's understood there.
Mhm.
In terms of, I'm just going over kind of my notes after like listening to everybody. So there's that part of it. To kind of give an idea, and I want to go back to the question that Rebecca had asked me earlier about, was there assistance? I created the testimony. What I asked CEA for was advice on what I am allowed to say as a board chair, as I've never worked as a board chair, and I wanted to make sure that I knew what I could or could not say based on Rebecca Good's question in an email that she had sent to the board earlier in terms of board chairs and board members. So that's where they kind of like weighed in there, to be clear. Chloe, you have a hand up.
Yeah, I just want to comment. So it's makes sense with the email. So one-on-one conversations are allowed because they don't constitute a quorum, but this board or boards are not allowed to email because it violates the Freedom of Information Act. So the entire board itself cannot discuss things via email because it's not public. So I just wanted to comment that because we wouldn't want to be violating the Freedom of Information Act. So those one-on-one conversations can happen because it's not a quorum, but it would be a quorum and then therefore an illegal meeting if the whole board is emailing back and forth about board business.
Understood.
Good to know. So we should not have sent that all out to everybody.
Other than like scheduling a meeting, like, but things like that with like, so I'm thinking about this, like if you're talking about this draft language, you cannot give feedback back and forth via email about it because it would constitute board business and then it would be an illegal meeting because it's not made public. Like this is being live streamed, so it has to be open
so
to the public.
The email of the announcement of the original announcement that Jennifer sent out to all of us as a board, that was not like, and then Patrice responded and I responded, that communication shouldn't have taken place like that.
The communication cannot happen to the whole board.
Good to learn.
But Rebecca, you could pick up the phone and call the chair and ask a question because it's not a quorum.
And Jennifer could have called each of us to like tell us about that, or she couldn't.
One-on-one meetings can happen, yes.
Okay.
So when I sent the message to you to send out to the board,
that's fine.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
and when
that's just scheduling.
And then when I sent out the message to the board that included you, because you were included on that message.
Which one?
When she sent the message about how she was going to respond to this raised bill, was that okay? Or you're saying no, she should not have done that? If her response should have been a one-on-one conversation with folks.
I can check with my legal representation at the CSDE. I can ask that question. because I'm not
Thank you.
positive.
Okay, thank you. Please do. All right. So in terms of what we were talking about earlier, which was the comments getting back to, I will take all this under advisement and move forward with the work.
Will we see the draft before you move forward? Because you're saying you'll take it under advisement, but you could, if you rejected it all, like then are you representing the board still?
I mean, we can't have another meeting before now and the date of testimony. So Chloe, with that in mind, I mean, am I allowed to even send out a draft of the update to the board?
If you, I would have to ask our legal department, but the communication should go through me.
Okay.
So if I'm sharing material,
unless it's one-on-one, like you going to Kristen and like talking to her about this original testimony, that's okay because it's a one-on-one conversation. So if I would love to get a call or see it and have a one-on-one conversation with you about this before it goes on Monday. Jennifer, I'll just put that out there.
I did just get clarification. So you can do a one-on-one meeting, but you cannot discuss a single issue with multiple members to avoid quorum. Or a quorum,
right.
The quorum requirement, rather.
Now we all know.
Yeah, and I'll just clarify, though, I will just kind of double down on, but first I would hope that you would have that one-on-one conversation with your co-chair before coming to Kristen or myself or anybody else.
Vice Chair Ritchie. Yes, thank you.
Apologies.
All right.
Vice Chair Ritchie.
No, I just want to make sure that we're okay. So Anne, we do need to wrap this up shortly. So Anne, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to sort of clarify when I had made the recommendation that we take some of the things that I felt were very clearly worked on, and then about the content assessment that we had discussed it pretty much at length about the praxis being the default, and then having options that the EEPs would be able to over time be able to see what works for them. Those discussions happened in those first 3 meetings, and the fact that it moved to subcommittee to discuss again, in my mind, it's important, I think, for this legislative body and our response to understand the work that has been done already, and that we really aren't in that much disagreement with the content, as Shannon had said, and that we have a response to the content. I just want to reiterate that I don't think it would be premature on our part to have that response in this response letter. Not saying that we've made the decision on this, but simply that they see our thinking and that we are moving forward and we're not that far off with them. And so we can, in fact, move forward fairly quickly on this issue, because we really, I'll be honest, I didn't see the need for a subcommittee at the point that we subcommitted. Okay, so I'm not saying we couldn't talk more about it, but I don't think there's nothing that we can say in response to this. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And then Kristen, as our final, go ahead.
Yes, so I would like to see more discussion within the subcommittee, because I didn't agree with, at least within this timeline, I wouldn't have been comfortable going forward with either the bachelor's option or the portfolio option at this time. I think it would be good to have more discussions, because it had been brought up as like, okay, some bachelor's degrees show a high correlation of teacher success in the classroom, but it was only a certain number of bachelor's degrees. It was for general science, physics, chemistry, math, and biology. So I wouldn't have been comfortable with those two options that were brought up as alternatives, but I think we needed to continue discussing them to get um, actual agreement from the whole board. I feel like we haven't really dug into the work, and that's what I was looking forward to discussing today, was what are the alternative minimum assessments, because we have all agreed that we want Praxis 2, we want AVE still, and we want to have a good discussion on what these alternative minimum assessments can be. It sounded like we were all in agreement for the bridge program and having, for the students that were within one SEM, having a bridge program, expanding that to other options. But I'm looking forward to having more discussions on what the other alternative minimum assessments can be. So I'd like this subcommittee to meet again sometime. I would love to work with you all. Would it be possible for us to have a meeting before our March 10th so that we can still present something meaningful to the rest of the board that's on the topic we were charged with?
We can certainly have Chloe send out a survey to see what times work to schedule, since this meeting was supposed to be an hour and a half for that work, and it was not able to happen at this time. So yeah, I don't see why we wouldn't ask Chloe to send that out. Okay. All right. I don't see any more comments. I would like to turn this over to allow some work, or even if it's logistical work, for that committee in the next 23 or so minutes for them to prepare possibly for the next meeting that they're going to have. So at this time, is there anything else that we need to discuss on this particular thing? If not, then I'm going to adjourn this portion of the meeting and allow the ad hoc committee to at least be able to get some of the stuff done that they were hoping to work on. All right. Thank you for the discourse in the community. I appreciate the honest and open discussion about the perceptions and concerns around both the raised bill and our charge and responsibilities as a committee. I look forward to continuing that work moving forward. Thank you so much. And anyone who is not assigned to this ad hoc committee can, I'll take a motion to, I'm not even sure that we should be doing a motion to adjourn, because it's really one meeting that we just kind of added a line item to, right? So at this time, I'm just going to ask everybody that is not a part of the ad hoc committee to go ahead and sign out and allow the group to do the work that they need to do at this time. Thank you again.
Sorry. Thank you.
I'm going to pause for a moment and then I will come right back to you. Okay, so I think who's left on the committee currently? Chloe, are these the folks for the ad hoc committee to do this work we have left on here?
That's a great question. I think so.
Okay.
Yes,
so if you're a part of this
yeah.
committee, I believe I received only one message currently about wanting to be the chair of this ad hoc committee. If you would like to be chair, go ahead and let me know at this time. All right.